Hey folks, Matt Sharp here with another Pacific Angler Friday Fishing Report. We're filming for October 21st, so if it's nowhere near October 21st, click up here. This is a link to all the Friday Fishing Reports. We do it most weeks, so I should have something more up to date for you. Well, it is finally coming. We're going to get some rain. The big question is going to be, though, is it going to be the party train that we all hope it is, or is it going to be a total train wreck? I'm not sure. In fact, we've had one of the driest September and Octobers on record, and there's a fair amount of rain in the forecast. We're going to look at that right off the hop because that's important both to possible flooding issues, but then obviously to fishing issues, because we're really hoping for some more colored water in a lot of areas to bring in more fresh fish, but we don't want it to blow out so hard that it's going to hamper fishing or, God forbid, more flooding. We're going to look at the Albion numbers as well because they tie into these water levels, and we're going to look at Chum numbers, we're going to look at Chinook numbers. We're also going to talk about the sea to sky. I was up there over the last little bit, and there's still some problems with water clarity on the main stem. I'm going to talk about that in detail because I think after this storm, we're going to see major blowouts, but we also should see some clearing water with some colder nights. We're also going to talk about lake fishing because we've had a wonderful interior lake season because of this warm weather, and that should continue. Temperatures are dropping, and that's what we want to see. We had folks out this last weekend. Jay was up a bunch. He's got details in the written version of the report we're going to talk a little bit about here for all you lake fishermen. Last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about a regulation thing, and it has to do with targeting certain species of salmon and how the regulations apply to that nowadays, because things have changed. For you old timers, it's not the same way as it used to be, and I'm going to teach you guys how to look at the regulations because there's a question we get asked all the time is this open to chum, for example, or is this open to coho? And it needs some clarifying because it isn't exactly the same as it used to be. We're going to talk about that in the middle of the report. If you guys want to see more reports like this, consider hitting the like button, hit the subscribe button. Let's get into it. All right, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Cheers to Friday and cheers to some rain coming because we desperately need it in a lot of places around the province. We're going to look at that first because obviously we don't want too much water and we're sort of holding our breath right now. When I pull it up and we look at Vancouver, oh, it just reloaded for me. It looks pretty nasty in Vancouver. We're going to have rain, and just full disclosure because these things change so quickly. I'm filming Wednesday night and I'm hitting refresh here as fast as I can, but it looks like Thursday we're going to get walloped. Friday we're going to get walloped. Saturday 25 to 30, 15 to 20, 30 to 40, 25 to 35, 20 to 25. That is a ton of water. Now, the good news off that is if I saw that out in the valley right across, I'd be really concerned. When we do throw it out to, let's say, for example, Chilliwack, it's not as much water. And this has been changing dramatically over the last 48 hours where they've said it might even be sunny or less rain and then more rain. But as I do it right now, there's a ton of water coming Vancouver way, and we're going to have to keep close eye on it. Now, when we look at the Chilliwack, they got a big dump coming Friday as you guys are watching us, and we need that. It does chill out to 5 mils, and then 10 to 15. There's a bigger bump midweek next week, but a lot can change when it comes to weather and it comes to the weatherman's prediction. So we'll leave that, but just keep an eye on it. Know that the rivers will rise. Chilliwack, Stave, Harrison, Capilano, Squamish to a bit. Let's just take a peek at that too and see what we got there. Let's see. We do have a storm warning in effect right across the board, but it looks like Thursday, tomorrow will be clear. Only 5 mils Friday, only 5 mils Saturday, a little bit more Sunday, Monday. And the big one here is temperatures. I'm going to get into that in a sec, but let's go back to Chilliwack / the valley where everyone's looking to go out fishing. So what's going to happen? Well, the rivers are going to rise. I'm not sure how much. If what's coming in Vancouver hits out there, it's going to be interesting. If what's in the forecast, or the weatherman nails it, this could be perfect fishing water levels, meaning that on Thursday, we'll get the ground a little damp. Friday, we're going to get a bump of water. We're going to see water rise. Because that ground has been so dry, I do expect it to be noticeable quite quickly. And then a chill out with 5 and 5, which is perfect. So if you're getting out, I think this weekend you need to be on standby if you love fishing in British Columbia. It is likely that you're going to be stood down and you're going to watch these water levels go crazy. But if they hold, this could be some excellent fish. It's going to pull in a bunch of fish that are staging in areas that they can't get through. It's going to shuffle around the fish in the river, and hopefully it's going to pull a bunch of fish up from the Fraser. Let's talk about Albion numbers next. And what is the Albion fishery? Well, it's a test fishery that's been going on for many years. I'm not going to get into too much of the details there. It's held around Albion. There's a number of different sets and a number of different kinds of nets that they set with different size netting to catch different fish. But we're going to start looking at the Chum one. I've been running off the Chinook run up into this point because obviously we've been more focused on Chinook. But now we're looking at Chum and seeing what those Chum numbers are going to tell. And when we pull up 2022, we're at 1809 right now, up until October 19th. That's not great, but it's not bad. When we pull up last year, what wasn't a good number, we're sitting at 1505. Now, both those numbers aren't great. When you look back at historicals, you see very commonly 18, 19, 25, even into the 3000 by this point in the season. But the caveat for this year is the water is so low, and we saw it with the Chinook. I think we're seeing it with the coho. I believe the fish are staging and or are a little bit behind. Can't guarantee that. I'm just crossing my fingers and giving it some wishful thinking. But I expect these numbers on Chum to increase dramatically over the high water as long as they can net properly during that time frame. But I expect more fish coming, and then we should see possible openings in areas where you're not allowed to target Chum, and maybe even possible openings for retention if those numbers increase. If those numbers hold the same or decrease, we are looking at another poor Chum run, which won't mean as many opportunities for you. So when it comes to opportunities, and this is the hard part, you would think that you would just look up your freshwater fishing regulations and it would be enclosed there. I actually wish they could do that. It would be much better for everybody involved. They don't, however, because freshwater is governed by the province, whereas salmon are governed by the federal government. So we have to go to separate sites for it, and there's been some tweaks when it comes to the wording on that federal side that you guys need to understand. And so let's pull it up here just so it's clear for everybody. And you are going to look up Lower Mainland recreational salmon fishing limits, openings, and closures. Now, I'm going to read through this quick because it is important. You're only allowed to fish for salmon in Region 2 during daylight hours. Back in the day, you could fish at night, and it was actually pretty fun as long as you were doing it ethically, but nowadays they don't want you to do that, so you can't fish outside of daylight hours. The total annual limit for Chinook, blah, 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 we'll get through that. No fishing allowed with 100 meters of government facility. That's usually in the way of hatcheries. Salmon measurements of how to measure salmon. They go over that in detail. I'm not going to get into that right now, but I want to get to this part. There is no fishing for salmon in Region 2 except for opportunities listed in the table below. This is the kicker, because back in the day, they had regulations that were blanket, and if they fell in the blanket regulations, you could go out and fish. You might not be able to retain, they might not open for retention, but when it's not listed here, you're not allowed to do it. Makes it a little bit hard to understand when it comes to fisheries that aren't on here. And it also relies on the government coming out and making announcements to open it, which the government is always really timely and very efficient with what they do. I digress. Long story short, however, if it's not in here, you can't do it. And so that leads to a couple fisheries that are in question right now, the stave being one of them. So when we look down at the stave, I'll just rip down here. Here's the whole list. Stave. Coho, September 1, December 31st for hatchery, marked per day, only 2 over 35 centimeters. So you're good to go for coho on that system right now. Chum, October 16th to December 31st, non-retention. And so up until October 16th, you couldn't even target them. But now we can target them in a non-retention way, so you can catch and release them. Up until the 16th, you weren't allowed to do that. You weren't even allowed to catch and release. Let's throw it out to another one, and that would be the Squamish. And so let me pull that up here. There we are, Squamish River. So here you can see how there's no Chum listing. It lists coho, September 15th to January 31st, 1 per day, hatchery marked only. And as we all know, there's not many hatchery fish up that way, so you can catch and release the wild ones. But because there is no Chum listed, you're not allowed to target them. You catch and release them when you get them, but you're not allowed to specifically target them. It makes it a little complicated, makes them a little challenging, but just play by these rules. Another big one that we'll run over just so you all know is the Harrison. That's one that a few people ask about. And so Chum, September 1 until further notice, non-retention. So there you can catch and release, you just can't keep them. This has been this gray area where we've had guys and girls going out and targeting them and catching and releasing them and breaking the rules, or keeping them, God forbid, when the regulations aren't in here. So I want everyone to bookmark this site. I had to bookmark it, and I have to refer back to it because of these tweaks that have happened in the last couple of years. All you have to do is Google search Region 2, Lower Mainland, Recreational Salmon Fishing Limits, Openings and Closures. Put any of that in Google. It'll figure it out for you. You're going to get this table. I'm going to leave links down in the description because we're constantly getting asked about this, and it is pretty clear when you go through it and read it in detail. Okay, let's talk about something a little more entertaining. Let's talk about lake fishing. So the lake fishing has been good to excellent. I wouldn't say it's been like bonkers because we're actually waiting for colder nights. I think those are coming next week. We got some unsettled weather, obviously, but if we get a semi-stable period in the next 2 weeks, I think we're going to have some of the best interior lake fishing of the year. What are you going to do up there? Well, it's boobies, blobs, micro leeches twitched in relatively shallow water as those fish move up into the shallows now that the water is dropped in temperature. If you've got a chance, get out. A lot of people forget about the lake fishing this time of year, and it's highly recommended, debatably some of the best of the entire season. So if you're running away from a storm down here, that is a good option for you. What are you guys going to do when you're out salmon fishing? Well, you're going to have bigger presentations, bigger spoons, bigger spinners, bigger twitching jigs, bigger float presentations. We can finally break out all those silly 25 mil beads that we all hoarded at the beginning of this season and then had to switch to the 10 mils again, which used to be the old tried, tested, and true. But those will come into play when we get higher and dirtier water. Last but not least, with these water conditions, I want everyone checking before they go out because there could be some safety concerns when you're out on the water due to this water, and we'll cross our fingers that Mother Nature doesn't do what she did last year and instead just gives us some really good fishing conditions. As always, you want to see more reports like this, consider hitting the like button, hit the subscribe button. I'm going to catch you in 2 weeks.